When I was younger, I had no interest in track and field. I hardly knew what the sport was. And then when I was in 7th grade, my friend convinced me to try it. My 8th grade year was truly the start of something, though. We had just co-opted with a new school, and the track team was with them. So I had to branch out and meet new people and adjust to a new team. I almost didn't go to the first day of practice, but I did, and it was one of the best decisions that I think I have ever made. Now I try to encourage almost everyone to be in track, but I find that a lot of people don't think it's interesting or they don't see the point in trying it. It's not like any other sport where you have a team and you work together constantly. In track, you compete by yourself in almost every event, and then you can push yourselves as hard as you need to get better. Everything depends on yourself. Track has been interesting almost since it was invented, which is important to learn about, along with the different events in the sport and how a track and field meet is run. In general, track and field is a very old sport, one of the oldest in the world, and everything we know about today's modern track and field stems from the past. The first little piece of track and field comes from hundreds of years ago when the Greeks began their Olympic Games and the events were based off of natural human abilities. This includes running, jumping, and throwing. The first records of track and field started in 776 BC and consisted of a 192-meter sprint. This is what they coined a stadium race. All events could only have male participants, and they competed in more than just running events. The traditional Olympic Games, belonging to only the Greek, ended about AD 393. Afterwards, they became extremely popular in England, and the first true mention of the sport, track and field, was recorded in 1154. At the same time, the practice fields were created in London. The sport was banned by King Edward III in the 14th century. It was allowed again by King Henry VIII for his hammer-throwing ability. The English continued their interest in the sport, and 500 years later, the first meet became open to the general public thanks to the West London Rowing Club, and later gave their power to the Amateur Athletic Association. The first North American meet was held in 1839 in Canada, a little before the first championship was put on in Europe. Track and field became popular in the United States in the 1860s after the creation of the New York Athletic Club, who also held the world's first indoor meet. But what is included in a meet? This is what makes up track and field, the variety of events that a person can participate in. The thing that makes track and field different from any other sport is that you are competing by yourself. There are just a few instances where you work with other people, and even then your numbers are limited. When people think about track and field, they think of running, when in reality there are throwing and jumping events as well. For both long jump and triple jump, the jumper gets a small runway to complete the activity. Specifically, in triple jump, the runner would run down the runway in 3 sections. The first would include the athlete purposefully landing on the foot they started running with, then take a larger step on the other foot, and then land in the pit. Thus the name triple jump. Each athlete in this event has 3 runs to get their best and strive to get to finals. In long jump, the most important element is speed, where all that is done is a fast sprint down the runway, then the athlete pushes themselves off the board at the end and launches themselves out and into the air. High jump consists of 1 bar laid across 2 stands on either side. The jumper runs from either the left or the right side, depending on their dominant side, and runs to jump over the bar, somewhat backwards by pushing off 1 foot rather than 2 like long jump or triple jump. The jumper is still in competition as long as they do not knock off the bar 3 consecutive times. Once they jump, they land on an inflated or foaming landing pit. Technically, pole vault isn't a jumping event, but it is categorized there for there is no other better place. Each person has a pole and runs down a slim runway with their pole. They plant their pole in this small box sunk into the ground right before the full mats, similar to those in high jump. When the pole is planted into the box, they leave the ground and raise themselves into the air and twist their body until they cross the bar raised into the air. Next, we can move on to running events, where there are sprints, mid-distance, and long-distance running, as well as hurdles and relays. In all running events, runners use starting blocks. They are set and used to help the runners push off and start their race. Different from other events, runners are organized into heats. Typically, the fastest runners are in the first few heats, unlike the other events such as throwing, where the athletes who throw the farthest are typically in the final flight. Most runners use cleats as well, with removable spikes to help them grip the track while they run. They change their spikes depending on what the event they are going to be running. The shortest running distances are known as sprints, and the largest sprint event is 400 meters or 1 lap around the track. Mid-distance running covers anything between 800 and around 2,000 meters, or about 5 laps around the track. Long-distance running is incredibly similar to mid-distance, having all the same rules. The only difference really is that these athletes run farther than mid-distance, so anything over 5 laps around the track. Hurdling combines running and jumping. The hurdles are set to a specific height based off of gender, and men jump higher than women. A hurdler can knock down any number of hurdles, but they are disqualified from the race if they stray into another person's lane or if they use their hands to knock down the hurdles. A hurdler can hurdle anywhere from 100 meters to 400 meters. Finally, there are relays, and this involves 4 runners from every team. Each one takes turns carrying a baton and passing it to the next runner. Every runner gets a baton for a quarter of the entire race. Throwing is the last of these events, and this includes shot put, discus, javelin, and in some cases the hammer throw. Lots of throwers use throwing shoes, while javelin throwers use cleats, but they are not like running cleats. Throwers also are organized into flights like jumping events. The hammer throws, where a metal ball weighing 16 pounds for men and 8.8 pounds for women is attached to a wire, and the thrower grips the end opposite to the metal ball. The thrower releases the implement after 3 or 4 consecutive spins. Shot put is perhaps the most similar event to the hammer throw in track and field, but instead of a metal ball being attached to a wire, it is just a metal ball by itself. In high school track and field, a junior high shot put weighs around 6 pounds, and a women's shot put weighs 8 pounds, and a men's shot put weighs 12 pounds. However, junior high boys will throw a women's shot put, and then will move on to a men's shot put once they reach high school. There are several ways to throw a shot put. Oftentimes, the glide method is used in high school track and field, though some athletes prefer to spin. The athlete holds the shot in the crook of their neck and pushes and flicks it outward into the sand pit. Next, there is a discus throw. A discus is a flat disc-shaped object and is thrown in the largest circle out of the previous couple events, and this being a little more than 8 feet in diameter. The spin is most often used in high school and college track and field and is used professionally. The discus is placed into the thrower's hand and they make 2 rotations. They spin the opposite way of their dominant side. For example, if I am right-handed, I am going to pivot on my left foot and therefore spin left with the discus in my right hand. A women's discus is slightly smaller than a men's discus, and a discus can range in prices from being $30 to over $350. Finally, we have the javelin throw, where competitors throw a spear-like implement as far as they can. They throw it over their shoulder at the end of the run, and it is one of the classic Olympic events as well. Javelins are very light. A men's javelin only weighs a little less than 2 pounds and is over 8 feet long. A women's jav weighs 1.3 pounds and is 7.2 feet long. This is the only throwing event that doesn't require a circle, but rather a runway. The javelin, once thrown, does not need to stick into the ground, but it must land point first to be qualified as a valid throw. Those are the main events in high school track and field, and they may seem fairly boring, but with the excitement of multiple events happening at once, you won't be sitting still for long. What is really unique about track and field is that there are more than one event happening at all times. Though throwing events start before running events simply because they take longer and athletes have to participate one at a time. When announcing the events at track meets, each event gets 3 calls. The announcer will say, for example, first call for girls 100-meter hurdles. Then they will keep announcing until they have finished the 3 calls, and after the 3rd call, the event will start. The announcers will also announce who places 1st through 8th in each event. Teams gain points based off of how many people place on their team. For example, those in higher placings will earn more points for their team. To letter in track and field, an athlete needs to achieve a certain number of points. Specifically, the athlete needs to earn the number of points that will average with how many meets the team has been to. For example, if a team has been to 10 meets, then that athlete will need to again 10 points or more to letter. State qualifying in events, specifically in North Dakota, depends first on whether or not you are in Class A or Class B, and it depends on what a person throws in regionals. For example, according to the North Dakota High School Activities Association, in girls discus, the state qualifying is 110 feet regardless of what class you are in. However, for boys, state qualifying for Class A is 145 feet, and for Class B it is 135 feet. Another way to state qualify is in regionals. If you are in the top couple spots, you are allowed to compete in the state tournament. Lots of times at track and field meets, spectators move to different events. Some even bring lawn chairs and blankets to camp out by specific ones to watch. These are just a couple of qualities that make track and field a memorable sport, and there's nothing quite like it, from the several events that we can compete in and how a meet is run and the history of the sport. In the end, there is nothing quite like track and field. Those memorable moments where you meet your goal and get a new personal best, or freezing at those early meets. I honestly don't know what I would have done if my friends hadn't made me join track and field. Today it is something that I look forward to, something that I always want to work towards. Throughout this speech, we've gone over the history of track and field, how it has led into today's track and field, all of the different events in the sport, and a little bit of what it is like to be at a track and field meet. I encourage you to try track and field if you haven't already. You never know what might be your event or what you can excel in.